And hello and welcome to everybody. We're just going to give another 30 seconds to a minute or so just to allow some more people to register because we're on the hour, and then we shall be underway. So bear with us a few more seconds and then we'll make a start. Okay then, let's make our start now. So hello and welcome to everybody. Good morning or good afternoon or indeed good evening, depending on where you are joining us from in the world today. Welcome to today's webinar held with Kaleido and TOMIA, focusing on realizing the potential for BCE in roaming. My name is John King. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Kaleido Intelligence, and I shall be your moderator for today. We have a really good webinar lined up with you, so hopefully during the next 45 minutes, all of you who are with us are going to be really, I think, informed about the potential for BCE in the roaming industry. There's lots of new insights and new content that we have to share with you, so we hope it's going to be a really good session for everybody. Before we go any further though, a couple housekeeping rules. So in your screen on the right hand side, you will see a Q&A box. Now, we want you to submit any and all questions that you want to ask during this session. We will have a designated time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So please do make use of that. We have several hundred people registered for the event today, which is fantastic. We've had a really good uptake from operators across the globe, which is great. And obviously, we want to hear from as many of you as possible. So as we share content, type any questions that you like into that box, submit it, and then during the allocated time, we shall get through as many of those questions as we can. Now I have the pleasure of introducing the speakers that we have with us today. So we have Robin Boswell, Director of Product Management of Clearing and Emerging Technologies at TOMIA, and Windsor Holden, Principal Analyst at Kaleido Intelligence.
Hello.
Good morning to you both, gentlemen. How are you?
Very good, John. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks.
Perfect. I'm really looking forward to the insights, all the content that you're going to share today. Obviously, I've seen the deck already, so I get a pre-glimpse, and I'm very excited about all that you'll be sharing. But it's great to have you on board with us today. For those of you joining us who aren't familiar, obviously TOMIA is one of the leading firms enabling the roaming sector at the moment, driving the future of connectivity through new technologies, which might include VoLTE, NFV, obviously BCE as well, helping really operators optimize their roaming business units. Obviously Kaleido Intelligence as well. We are a research house really specializing in the roaming and the connectivity sector. So all we do as a research firm is essentially research through surveys, interviews, data-led methods, all the areas pertaining to the roaming market. And of course, BCE is an area that's high on the priority that we want to cover. And as we move into the agenda, that is exactly what we are going to be sharing with you today. Insights we will be sharing from Kaleido, stemming from a new white paper that's actually being launched today. And this event that we're on is the launch event for the white paper. Now, that's going to be bringing new insights to the market that we, Kaleido, and specifically Windsor, have been putting together over the last couple of months, really looking at what those benefits of BCE can look like for the roaming market. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, this is one of the areas of real innovation and discussion within the roaming ecosystem. There are many voices which are incredibly strongly in favor. There are some voices which are maybe more cynical, and there are voices which really are just unsure about what benefits this can bring. And the aim of our session, and indeed what we want to show in the white paper, is what we found from our research into this area. So Windsor will lead us with this part of the webinar to start with. We'll then hand over to Robin, and Robin's going to give us really the view from the ground, from TOMIA's perspective, as obviously they have a BCE offering, they have been working with operators in the space, so that's going to help you to understand obviously what that actually looks like and can look like in the future. And as you can see at the end of the webinar, we're then going to summarize what the main findings are and then move to our questions and answers section. So we hope you enjoy the presentation today. Like I said, please submit questions as you go. And on that note, Windsor, I'm going to hand over to you to lead us on.
Thanks, John. Could you turn to the next slide, please, and we'll just give a little overview. Okay, so to begin with, looking at key roaming settlement challenges in the market today. Well, what you're looking at is a situation where you've got the emergence of IoT ecosystems with physical devices and vehicles internetworked to facilitate the use of developments such as big data analysis, AI and automation. Now, this poses three fundamental problems from a roaming perspective. First of all, you've got a surge in traffic volumes. Second, you've got a proliferation in the number of device profiles which are having to be identified. And thirdly, you have a greater variety of network technologies in use. Now, if you look at the right-hand side of the slide, you can see we've got the forecast increase in IoT M2M roaming devices and the increase in annual roaming traffic. So we're estimating that by 2025, you'll have more than 1.1 billion roaming IoT devices, while total traffic data generated will be over 600 petabytes per annum. So what this means is that it's placing a significant strain on all the systems, and that in turn will potentially impact on performance and increasing costs. Now, on the second point that are made out of those three fundamental problems, the systems that are designed purely around individual human uses of voice and data may then struggle to distinguish between a human using a smartphone and a piece of connected industrial machinery. Now, what that means is that the existing system for roaming and billing settlement TAP isn't really up to the job. It's been around, the first TAP specification is now over 25 years old. Now, while some specifications involved to support new services, the procedures are no longer capable of keeping pace with the number of devices and technologies which are roaming across networks. It's too rigid for 5G and or IoT. So it can't support the low level of detailed billing required. So what that means is you've got a lot of labor-intensive manual settlement. And in fact, for IoT, it could cost more to implement TAP billing than the revenue generated, because you're generating the records on a daily basis. It also means legacy billing models, which are predicated purely on those data volumes, are impractical, because many roaming IoT devices may also generate significant numbers of events, use a lot of network resource, and not actually consume much data. And again, as those devices are effectively silent for long periods of time, again, despite consuming resource, the system isn't charging for them. So TAP is viewed as too complex, too expensive, and difficult to upgrade, and that will remain static for the foreseeable future, won't support any future charging models. At the same time, this lack of visibility around traffic volumes translates into revenue leakage. So you can't effectively monetize that traffic. So can we move on to the next slide, please, John? I'm not seeing the next slide. Have you managed to switch it across? Lovely. Thanks, John. We've got that now. Yeah, lovely. So there are a few perceived barriers to BCE. Some players have actually got the attitude that, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That the costs of deploying BCE might ultimately exceed any savings that you've made or new revenues that you've generated, or that it might be too complex to integrate with existing platforms. And you've got some carriers, particularly the smaller ones with no plans to launch 5G or NB-IoT, and who aren't really dominant in M2M roaming, might think, oh, do we need to go down that road? Now, clearly, the extent to which these represent barriers to adoption will vary from operator to operator, but it should be emphasized that in most cases, the route to deployment is relatively straightforward, particularly if that roadmap is followed with a trusted partner such as a clearinghouse that can shoulder a lot of the heavy lifting. So let's look at the particular perceived barriers we've got here. So the first one is, complexity of integration. Now, BCE has been specifically designed to address wholesale billing and settlement processes, and it's far more adaptable to work with wholesale roaming discount agreements. Now, while TAP relies on invoices generated for each event, BCE just enables billing based on usage data aggregated on a per-day basis. It's only used in cases where there are bilateral agreements between the operators at present. Now, in terms of implementation and integration, there are important procedural differences between TAP and BCE. Now, for example, TAP files are sent daily with notification files sent if there's no traffic. Under BCE, frequency is as agreed between the two parties. TAP's got a returns account procedure. BCE, it covers the need to invoke DDRs if required. Current reporting systems used for TAP won't support BCE without changes. But from a practicality perspective, implementation should ideally occur at a point when the operators or their partners are launching new services, so the service is optimized for billing and charging at the outset. Now, necessity is the third point. Do I have to go down this road? Well, while few operators are currently BCE capable, most are recognizing its inevitability. Now, it's, as I said, TAP's viewed as too complex to upgrade, and it's going to stay in this maintenance mode. But so that actually isn't going to support any of the future charging models. Additionally, you've got new charging models that might arise outside BCE that could be supported on a bilateral basis, such as signaling-based presence models, where the events might be used to detect more IoT devices that aren't, say, predefined. Now, thirdly, it's no other industry-approved alternatives to BCE have emerged, meaning that it's going to become the de facto replacement for wholesale roaming. So what this means is that if you want to monetize new services and business models, operators are going to have no choice but to deploy BCE. Now, lastly, the expense that has been cited as an inhibiting factor, and certainly for in-house implementation, that's going to vary from operator to operator. Now, what we would say is that if you're going down, there's two ways of looking at this. If you're going down the way of doing it yourself, it can be quite laborious. Alternatively, you can outsource the entire settlement and reconciliation process to a BCE agent, as a majority are already doing with TAP. So in cases where the different MNOs involved are served by different vendors, then they too are party to the agreements. But what this is essentially saying is that, to re-emphasize, it's the heavy lifting here is being done by the clearinghouse. To begin with, it means that the MNOs aren't obliged to maintain the dedicated compliance specialists in-house, even for tier one operators. The roaming department's typically a small team within a much larger IT department, and thus keeping abreast of both the evolving standards and issues such as local regulations. It's a very time-consuming and inefficient process, and indeed maintaining local systems to comply with those regulations. And secondly, if you're using a third party providing a combination of revenue assurance and an automated reconciliation process with reporting tools covering both traffic streams, then you're avoiding the risks of duplicating traffic and of duplicating charging. Can you please go to the next slide, John? So I'd like to spend a few minutes just going through the benefits of BCE. So to start with, it's wholesale roaming automation. At the present time, you're talking around an average of $6 per roamer in overhead costs to settle roaming transactions. Now, one of the key benefits from BCE is this wholesale automation. It's based on bilateral agreements. The reports and settlement occur at agreed intervals, that could be annual, quarterly, or monthly. So you don't have this traditional, very rigid settlement window. That in turn enables the MNOs to save on the monthly and annual settlement costs, while you've got this combination of automated settlements and flexible settlement periods, which provides a far greater efficiency in the cash flows. You're also automating processes such as support for in-house control and the self-validation of invoices through this ability to validate the invoices by comparing them with actual traffic. And meanwhile, reconciliations ensuring a pre-invoicing audit of the data. Now, if you look at the chart on the right-hand side, you can see how Kaleido is estimating the scale of the sort of migration across from TAP to BCE. So we're saying that over 10 billion in wholesale roaming revenues will be settled annually using BCE by 2026. That's representing just under half of total wholesale roaming revenues from IoT and consumer mobile roaming traffic settled globally. Could we go to the next slide, please, John? Lovely, thanks. So next up is new commercial models. Now, what BCE does, it allows for a variety of new models here. So you could be looking at charging on a per IMSI per day basis, where the records are combined into a single monthly report. You've got the option of volume-based charging. You've got threshold-based charging, where the charging or the discount applied changes when a threshold is met. So, for example, this allows differential charging per gigabyte, depending on whether the aggregated traffic is, say, LTE or NB-IoT. It can also support use cases where the wholesale amount is a fixed charge, regardless of the usage or the number of devices connected. It also supports mutual forgiveness in instances where the charges are zero. Now, if we again look at the right-hand side of the slide, we're looking at the wholesale roaming opportunity from this fixed fee per IMSI per day. We are estimating that the operators can generate around about another 2 billion in additional revenues annually by 2026. And what we're looking at here is the volume, particularly of the permanently roaming devices that are generating low volume traffic, that's less than 10 meg per month, and switching and assuming that there's going to be this transition over to this new charging model. Now, when we were, this is how we were then looking at looking at this means of forecasting this additional revenue. And really, when we spoke to the operators, they were particularly interested in BC for this reason. It's not so much 5G, it's this ability of BCE to distinguish between and therefore facilitate the monetization of different types of IoT traffic, which is the most compelling reason for deployment in the first instance. Can we go to the next slide, please, John? So a couple more benefits delineated here. So if we look at dispute resolution within TAP, it's very slow, it's very cumbersome. You've got numerous discrepancies emerging around reconciliation and rating structures. Additionally, you can use a blockchain structure, blockchain infrastructure, which is allowing you to streamline the processes. And as a result, the payment discrepancy analysis and dispute resolution takes minutes rather than days. Now, I'm sure, as Robin will elaborate, TOMIA is using blockchain to reduce the transactional time frame by saving time on settlement and dispute management, while also increasing the transparency of the process. So what this means is the information stored immutably. By implementing blockchain, the time spent on dispute management will be sharply reduced. And in addition, with automating the settlement supply chain, the first step towards driving future use cases such as bandwidth on demand is achieved. Now, if we look at the next benefit, discount agreements. Now, these typically take the form of annexes to the standard international roaming agreements. The processes behind these are complex and labor intensive. There's no agreed standards. Now, these usually take about 45 days on average. The process for discounted settlement can take up to 12 months. These issues can be addressed through the implementation of blockchain-based solutions. And indeed, the first MVP of the GSMA's blockchain for wholesale roaming took this approach. Next slide, please, John. I think we might be coming to the end of my section. Yeah, just one more point here to emphasize the fact that we're talking about high volumes of data being supported here. One of the problems with TAP is that it has limitations on the volumes of data that can be supported. That isn't the case with BCE. And in fact, that the problem you would get with TAP is that if data being used goes above a certain level, then you're not able to monetize it because the system can't support it. Given that the high volumes of data that we're anticipating over the next 5-10 years, so 3,900 petabytes of traffic by 2026, moving forward into the second half of the decade, that will be exacerbated by fully autonomous vehicle adoption. TAP simply isn't going to be able to cope. BCE will be able to cope perfectly with this. And I think, John, that's the end of my slide deck.
Indeed. Windsor, thank you so much for sharing. I think some really interesting insights about, I guess, both the potential of BCE and what that looks like in the industry, and then identifying some of those use cases as well. So I really appreciate that, and a reminder to all the participants that the wider white paper, which provides more and indeed expands on these insights, will be coming to you shortly after this webinar. Windsor, whilst you're on the line, we have had an audience question come in, and maybe you don't mind fielding this for us. I think it's coming from an operator. It says our firm doesn't have high volumes of wholesale roaming traffic to deal with, so does it make sense for us to migrate to BCE?
Okay. I don't know the specifics of the operator. All I said is they don't have a huge volume themselves. Now, if you're a smaller operator, tier 3 or thereabouts, you probably don't have a great deal of roaming traffic. You might be a larger operator that just isn't on a key roaming corridor. You might not be looking at 5 GSA anytime soon. Then it might not be a priority, certainly from an in-house perspective. But what I would say is the combination of factors I've been talking about, and the fact that essentially the changes you have to make as an operator are far more limited if you're actually outsourcing all the management to the clearinghouse, which in a lot of cases, and particularly the smaller operators, is something you're probably already doing. There will be some procedural changes when you're swapping over from TAP to BCE, but the current reporting system will need to be reconfigured to support BCE. TAP in turn should no longer be used as the feed to internal sources, but in most cases, the efficiency savings and also the chance to develop and plan for new revenue streams from optimal business models will significantly outweigh any cost from disruption, dual running, and so on.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Wins. I know I put you on the spot there a bit, so I appreciate the answers. So, okay, perfect. And just a reminder again to all of you attendees, on your right-hand side under the Q&A section, please do submit any and all questions that you want to ask during this webinar. We do actually have a designated question and answer section at the end of the webinar. And I had a couple chats that came through as well. People asking, are they the only people in the room? Most certainly not. That's just the viewpoints you have as an attendee. So we have several hundred registrations, and actually there's well over 100 people in the room with us at the moment. But that being said, if we want to answer as many questions as we can, so don't feel shy, keep submitting them. But moving on, I will now have the pleasure to hand over to Robin Boswell from TOMIA. Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Widzer, for that insight. It's really helpful to see those statistics that you've shared. At TOMIA, we, being the clearinghouse for several operators in the world, in fact, we do see these trends since the last few years. At times when COVID hit and there were a lockdown in several countries, we observed the fact that roaming traffic diminished or reduced to a large extent. However, operators still continued to have significant roaming traffic in their networks. To the next slide, Jean. In 2020, operators were looking at how they could analyze their roaming traffics in their network. And to be precise, in 2020, we had several requirements from our customers in order to analyze the traffic in their network, being machine to machine, whether they are permanent devices, etc. We observed that operators were unable to monetize their entire inbound revenues, inbound traffic for machine to machine in the right manner, largely because they were unable to apply any kind of daily or monthly fees on the devices that are connected in their network. Now, these are due to limitations in TAP, which is a standard or de facto settlement process followed by many operators in the world. Applying only a usage-based model limits operators to settle as per their agreed commercial models with their partners. It leads to an inaccurate settlement charges, which eventually requires a monthly recalculation or an annual recalculation to apply device fees, apply a threshold or a tiered kind of a usage model onto those agreements itself. What we've seen in one particular case with our customer, a tier 1 operator in Europe, they faced similar challenges. They had issues in applying the right charging or rating models in TAP. They had agreements, commercial agreements on machine-to-machine agreements where they wanted to charge a device fee, a daily fee for the devices that are connected. They were unable to monetize based on the different profiles of the devices in their network. Now, as per the commercial agreements, in most cases, operators disclose the APNs or a set of IMSI ranges that are considered as machine-to-machine. However, since 2020, operators have seen that there are many kinds of devices that are connected in their network, some that are permanently roaming, some that are only using network resources and don't generate too much of a usage. All these parameters somehow were leading to an inefficient settlement process in the end, requiring operators to manually adjust either via credit notes or debit notes. It also led to the fact, next slide, Jean, that most operators were missing out on a revenue opportunity. Now, in this case that we saw with our customer, there were 800,000 devices in the network for a particular month, generating about 10,000 gigabytes of data. These 800,000 devices were mainly identified using IMSI ranges and the APNs that they were using. Combining signaling and applying some kind of detection algorithms, like if devices are connected 90 days continuously, are they connected in the network and not generating any traffic? There is a potential to actually identify additional IMSIs that were registered or were using the network resources on a permanent basis. Now, applying BCE's flexible charging models, where BCE allows operators to now charge a daily fee or a monthly fee is able to charge based on thresholds or tiered models on the usages. Operators can also monetize additional revenue by charging simply a daily fee on these devices. We also observe that there is a lot of manual activities that operators have to invest in. So there are resources that are required to perform manual recalculations on a monthly basis. It also leads to inaccuracies in the settlement. So errors largely because of incorrect charging models being applied, a lot of incorrect credit and debit notes, a lot of disputes and discussions between operators to finalize on the number of devices that are connected or to even agree upon the total usage of all the M2M traffic. Now, at TOMIA, next slide, Sean. At TOMIA, we saw an opportunity where we could combine two of TOMIA's solutions, one being the TOMIA's newly launched BCE solution. Now, at TOMIA, we consider the BCE standards as something that is going to be very helpful to operators in the future. However, we've positioned our BCE solution slightly differently to the way we did with our clearing services. The first thing is that we wanted to enhance BCE, not just to consider transactions or usages by devices or subscribers, but also include signaling events to then enable operators to start charging not just based on usages, but also based on the devices that are connected in the network. So that's an important parameter to consider when operators are going to launch BCE in the future. BCE also provides flexibilities for operators to now segment or profile the devices in the network. Now, depending on operators and enterprises' use cases, as Vincent said, connected cars in the future, it could be parking meters or security cameras. Each of these use cases require different kind of analysis, different kind of profiling of the devices. And based on these use cases, BCE is supposed to apply different kind of segments, different kind of charging models. Using these to automate the entire settlement process is a value add that we can leverage from BCE. Combining it with blockchain where you could have the contracts aligned, you could have the reconciliation results aligned as well on the blockchain is something that is not present today and will only improve the settlement process in the near future. Lastly, it is also important to consider the fact that there are going to be more traffic generated. As Vincent was saying, in the next few years, the devices are going to generate enormous number of transactions and usages. Some of these devices, connected cars, for example, are required to be processed within an operator's region or country. There may be local regulations or data privacy concerns that have to be taken into account. Therefore, at TOMIA, we've positioned our solution to be deployed in multiple options where operators can ensure that the BCE solution is processing data locally or in region in adherence to local and data privacy requirements. Next slide, John. Now, TOMIA also has an analytical tool where we leverage signaling information to combine it with usages. BCE provides this flexibility where devices can be charged a monthly fee. Operators can charge differently based on the technology the devices use. Now, combining these charging models along with signaling and usage events using an IMEI database to detect machine-to-machine devices more accurately, identifying usage pattern of the devices. This combination provides operators a value-added edge in order to monetize all their mobile IoT agreements more effectively. Now, in the case of the operator where we were doing this analysis, next slide, John, we observed that in TAP, there were 800,000 devices generating about 300,000 euros monthly settlement charges. Just by combining TOMIA's M2M detection solution, we were able to identify 16% additional devices in a month. That potentially could be an increase in revenue by 48,000 euro. Combining machine-to-machine detection solution and BCE and applying a fixed monthly fee on these devices that were connected to the network on a monthly basis, we could achieve a 72% increase in the settlement charges for this operator. That is an increase from 300,000 monthly charge to over 500,000 settlement charge in a particular month. It also increased the average revenue per device by 48%. So the combination of applying a device fee and a usage fee increased the average revenue per device by 48%. And if you compare that to the average charge per megabyte, that's around 57% increase already. It implicitly also increases the efficiency in the settlement. So there are no longer manual activities to be performed. It provides an improved cash flow for the operators, and also to talk about the time to settlement. So it ensures that there is no longer a 45-day delay. It ensures that on a monthly basis, the settlement is more accurate and more efficient. So to summarize, so next slide. The key takeaways that we identified with this case study with this operator was that just by combining signaling and usages, we were able to increase the revenue opportunity for our customer. Combining that with BCE's flexibility on the charging, we were able to increase the average inbound revenue per device. We were able to provide more accuracy in between the commercial agreements that are being signed and the settlement processes and the charges itself. Overall, it increased the efficiency across the settlement process. So this use case was done or carried out for the mobile IoT agreement, but the same applications can be carried over to data, to 5G services as well. It enabled the operator to have an improved cash flow and drastically reduced any manual recalculations or credit or debit notes that have to be handled in the process. Lastly, by automating the settlement process, there is reduced risk with reconciliation errors. It also enables the operators to address a larger segment of enterprises where the operating margins are quite low. So by automating the entire settlement process, operators can now address the long tail, wherein they have larger enterprise segments that couldn't have been addressed earlier just by using TAP. So in my conclusion, I would say that it has also enabled TOMIA to understand the potential of BCE and also enabled our customers to widely accept BCE and the M2M detection solutions. Over to you, John. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Robin. Thank you so much. I think given the topic and the emergence of this technology, to get, I guess, a view from the ground in this case study like you're sharing, I think is really important for people to see, obviously alongside the insights that we would bring as a research house. So thank you for sharing. And in fact, I'll do the same to you as I did to Windsor, if that's okay, because we had another question come through, and we've had quite a few actually, which is fantastic. But one that I'll ask you now, if you don't mind, is what is the expected launch for BCE by operators in the market? Can you share some views on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. A lot of operators ask that around as well. I'll have to give you a bit of a lengthy answer to that. The GSMA has defined the standards for BCE, and they have actually approved the initial standards that can be used already by operators in the market. In fact, TOMIA and several other vendors are already prepared and launched their BCE solutions. We have trials ongoing with our customers. I also believe other operators in the world are also doing trials. It is most likely that I expect at least 2 to 4 commercial launches by this year and a lot more launches by January 2022, largely for NB-IoT services or for mobile IoT agreements. That's the use case that we see most likely to be used by operators.
That's perfect. Thanks. Great. Thanks for the on your feet feedback. Okay, great. We're almost at the stage of the question and answers. And again, thank you for all of you who have been sending them in. I think we've got a good amount to take up the time that we'll have at the end. But at the same time, please keep sending them in, because if we do run short of time today, we will follow up with you afterwards. I think with a topic like this, what we want to achieve is informing the industry as much as we can. So please keep them coming in. Before we get there, though, I'm going to quickly hand back to Windsor And Windsor, I'd just like you, I guess, to sum up from your side your view of, I guess that the key findings and indeed the, I guess, strategic recommendations when we're looking at this topic.
Thanks, John. I think you've actually gone past the takeaways, just to finalise. You can switch to the takeaway slide, please.
You see it in front of you now, Windsor?
Not at the moment. We have a lag. Lovely.
We can all see it.
Thank
so
you. Yes, we've got that. Yeah. Just very briefly, from our perspective, the takeaways here. BCE is presenting the operators with this means of automating and simplifying wholesale roaming. You can distinguish between the different device and network types. That's absolutely critical for developing new revenue streams. Also enables you to reduce revenue leakage and settlement costs. We would suggest that when you do implement BCE, the best time to do so is while you are launching new services, so that service is optimized for billing and charging using BCE from the outset. You can do BCE in-house, but we would strongly recommend that in a lot of cases you go for the managed service option, outsourcing to clearing houses. So what that means is that you don't have to have a dedicated team to deal with the day-to-day management and keep abreast of standards developments and compliance issues. It's far more efficient to do it this way. And lastly, if you are going down the blockchain route, ensure that you are going for a DLT agnostic solution. Ensure that the applications are DLT agnostic to allow for easier adoption in the future. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Windsor. And now we'll move to the question and answer section. We'll do that for the remainder of our time. So, firstly, again, thank you to everyone for submitting. Let's just crack straight on with these questions. And I think, Robin, I will start with you, if that's okay. We have an audience question that has come in that says, what drill down flexibility does BCE support, and how detailed can the lowest level, how detailed can the lowest level of data output be?
I think there are two aspects to it. One is on the charging models itself. BCE supports various granularities that operators can now start charging. I mean, BCE supports inherently charging based on devices, IMEIs, APNs, QCI parameters. You can also combine these to a large extent to apply a tiered or a threshold use model. So in our experience, we've seen that operators are most likely to start with a tiered usage model and applying a device fee per devices that are connected in the network on a daily or a monthly basis. Going forward, I also believe that operators will use to differentiate these rates based on the technologies being used or the different quality of service parameters that are applicable. So comparing it to TAP, operators have a lot more flexibility now in terms of the granularity that is supported in the charging itself. In terms of disputes, BCE inherently supports exchange of transactions. So the daily granular level, the transactions can be exchanged in case there are disputes that can be used for reconciliation purposes. So inherently, I think BCE supports more granularity, more flexibility to operators as compared to the current settlement processes.
Thank you, Robin. That's great. Windsor, I'm going to switch to you now. And this question I found interesting actually, because it's going more into the area of BCE and then related to blockchain as well. So the question is based on, I think, what you were sharing earlier about the complementary nature between the two. The question is, to what extent is there alignment between the GSMA specification and member MVP work on BCE and its work on blockchain?
Okay, if you look at the work the GSMA has been doing in the blockchain space, the aim is essentially to be using a modular approach whereby blockchain is the rails on which the various business applications are run. So to begin with, they've been working on this discount in settlement minimum viable product, which will be integrated into GSMA applications beginning next month, I think. The next MVP is going to be around BCE. Just to note, and this aligns with what TOMIA is doing, the aim is to develop a solution that is ledger agnostic and, as per CBAN et al., features inter-network interoperabilities.
Okay, great. Thank you, Windsor. And I'm aware of time. I know this is a 45-minute webinar, but why not go 5 minutes over? Join us as we tackle a couple more questions. Robin, I have another one for yourself, which is, in a bilateral BCE agreement, do you expect the increased revenue to be offset by increased costs on the outbound side?
That's an interesting question. Indeed, the presentation that or the case study that we considered at this moment is for a missed opportunity on the inbound side. But also there are efficiencies that can be considered on the outbound side. Now, BCE uses the local CDRs in order for both the home operator to settle the visitor network transactions and the home outbound transactions as well. By just using BCE, by applying the right charging models based on the commercial agreements, there is an improved cash flow that the home operator can benefit from. There is reduced manual efforts that the operator can save upon. And to answer your question, if there is going to be more outbound cost, probably there is going to be additional cost associated if you have a lot of M2M traffic that you are sending to your partners as well. But however, weighing the options, I would still say that there is a lot of benefit for the home operator in terms of process efficiencies, improved cash flows, and also aligning the commercial agreements to the charging models that are being applied on the settlement process.
Perfect. And stay with me, Robin, so I'll direct the next question to you as well. And this is about charging models. So this question is, what are the common charging models being discussed or which are going to be implemented?
At the moment, what we're seeing is that operators are looking at a usage and a fixed fee or a surcharge being applied for each devices that are in the network. So in the beginning, operators are going to differentiate the usages based on the technology being used. So NB-IoT as compared to a 4G traffic, for example. However, most operators that we've spoken to are negotiating commercial agreements that includes a device fee either on a daily or a monthly basis. If I look at the Asian market, for example, where an IMSI cap model is very prevalent, I do believe that that's a valid use case that can be also supported via BCE as the initial launches itself.
Perfect. Thank you, Robin. I think we're drawing to a close now, so I think we might have to wrap it up there. I will say, I mean, there's some questions from you that we will follow up with afterwards. I see questions, Randall from yourself, Maria from you, Xavier, Avelino, etc. So don't worry, we will follow up with you after the event for sure. And a reminder that, again, this is the launch event for the new white paper that Kaleido have produced in conjunction with TOMIA, and all of you will receive a copy of that afterwards. So on that note, I will just say thank you to everyone so much for attending. I think it's been really good to have you joining us today. I think it's great to discuss topics like this, and I hope that you have been informed. I hope it's been thought-provoking. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of Robin and TOMIA, and likewise us here at Kaleido, to say if you want to discuss this further, we'd be more than happy to engage in dialogue with you. So thank you for that. Windsor, Robin, thank you so much for making the time available. It's really good to get your insight on this topic.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure. All right, we will stop it there. So thank you everyone for attending, and stay well.